Commander Zara Kell stood at the big window of her command center and watched her world die. The planet Kepler 442b turned slowly below her, and she could see the fires burning in every city. Orange flames lit up the dark night side of the world, where millions of her people used to live and work and dream. Another bright flash filled the sky. That was transport ship number 47 blown to pieces. 47 ships full of families trying to escape. Children who would never see another sunrise. Parents who died protecting kids they would never hold again. "Commander, the North Wall has fallen," said Lieutenant Vex 9. His voice was quiet, almost dead. "The Vorthon army is moving fast. They have millions of soldiers now. We have..." He stopped talking and looked at his computer screen. "Maybe 12,000 left, maybe less." Zara Kell did not turn around. She kept watching the fires below. Her people had been fighting for 3 months. 3 months of hell against an enemy that felt no pain and showed no mercy. The Vorthons were like machines made of meat and metal. Their crystal weapons cut through shields like hot knives through butter. Their ships were bigger than cities. Their soldiers never got tired, never got scared, never stopped killing. "Tell all ship captains to start the final escape plan," she said. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt like screaming. "We will hold the capital city for 6 more hours. Give the civilians time to run." But where could they run? The Vorthons had taken over system after system. They killed entire species or made them slaves. The great Galactic Council was gone. The mighty Zentaurian space navy was nothing but scrap metal floating in space. Even the smart Andromedans with all their amazing technology could not stop these monsters. The building shook as another bomb hit somewhere close. Through the window, Zara Kell saw a whole section of the western part of the city fall down like a house of cards. Under all that broken concrete and twisted metal were people. Real people with names and families and dreams. Now they were just numbers in a war that was already lost. "Commander." Vex 9's voice was suddenly different, excited, confused. I'm seeing new ships coming into our system. Many ships. But they are not like anything in our databases." Zara Kell turned away from the window. For just a second, something that felt like hope started to grow in her chest. Then she pushed it down. Hope was dangerous now. Hope would just make the end hurt more. "More Vorthon ships?" she asked. "No, ma'am. These are completely different. The computer says they are primitive, like very old technology, but they are flying in perfect formation. Very organized. Very military." Vex 9 looked confused. "They are sending radio messages on emergency channels. But the language is strange. I have never heard it before." The big hologram screen turned on and showed the space around their planet. Zara Kell stared at the new ships that were coming toward them. They looked rough and ugly compared to the smooth, beautiful ships that galactic civilization was used to. These new ships were all angles and armor and weapons. They looked like they were built for war and nothing else, but the way they moved together showed discipline. These were soldiers who knew their job. "Ma'am, we are getting a transmission from them," said the communications officer. "It is coming on many different frequencies. They seem to have some kind of translation computer working." "Let me hear it," Zara Kell said. The voice that filled the command center was rough and deep. The accent was like nothing any of them had ever heard. "This is Colonel Jake Murphy of the Terran Defense Force. I am commanding the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. We got your calls for help and we came to fight with you. Hold your ground, Zephyrian forces. The cavalry is here." Nobody in the command center said anything for a long moment. The words hung in the air like something from a dream. Then Vex 9 spoke and his voice was full of disbelief. "Ma'am, they say they are humans. Our computer records say humans are a species that has not even learned to travel between stars yet. They come from a system called Sol that nobody cares about." Zara Kell looked at the ugly, primitive ships as they moved into attack positions. They were putting themselves between her dying world and the huge Vorthon fleet that was coming to finish the job. Either these humans were the bravest people in the galaxy, or they had no idea what they were about to face. She opened a communication channel. "Colonel Murphy, you need to leave right now. The Vorthon fleet has over 2,000 big warships. They will destroy you completely." The human's laugh was rough, but somehow made her feel better. "Ma'am, with respect, we did not come all this way just to run from a fight. Besides, we have fought these Vorthon jerks before. We know some tricks they do not expect." As if his words had called them, the Vorthon fleet began to turn toward the new arrivals. The alien ships were covered with crystal weapons that had cut through every defense the galaxy could make. Zarakel felt sick as she watched the two fleets move toward each other. The humans had maybe 50 ships. The Vorthons had thousands. "This is crazy," she whispered. But something in the human colonel's voice had lit a small fire inside her, something she thought was dead forever. For the first time in months, Zarakel found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, hope was not completely gone. The Vorthons had been winning for so long that they thought they were invincible. They had destroyed every fleet, conquered every world, killed every hero that stood against them. But now these strange humans from nowhere had come to fight. And something about the way they talked, the way they moved their ships, made Zarakel think that maybe the Vorthons were about to learn something new. Maybe they were about to learn what happened when they picked a fight with Earth. The first shots of the battle lit up space like deadly fireworks. Vorthon crystal beams shot out toward the human fleet. These beams had enough power to destroy anything they hit. But the human ships did not fight like anything the galaxy had ever seen before. "By the sacred crystals," said Vex 9 as he watched the battle screen. "They are not trying to avoid the weapon fire. They are flying straight into it." Colonel Jake Murphy's voice came over the radio. He sounded calm, like he was ordering lunch instead of fighting for his life. "All units do pattern Delta 7. Remember, these crystal boys put all their power into attack. Time to show them what happens when someone shoots back." The human ships moved with perfect timing. They did not fly in the smooth, graceful way that galactic fleets usually moved. Instead, they flew in tight, hard formations that seemed to soak up damage and keep working. When Vorthon beams hit their ships, the humans did not run away or try to fix their shields. They just kept coming, charging up their own weapons. "Ma'am," called out the sensor officer. His voice was full of surprise. "The human weapons are not energy beams. They are shooting some kind of solid objects, but they are going incredibly fast." Zarakel watched in amazement as the human fleet opened fire. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, they shot what looked like pieces of metal moving at almost the speed of light. The metal slugs hit Vorthon ships with terrible force, punching through crystal armor like it was made of glass. "Impossible," she said quietly. "Solid weapons should be useless against energy shields." But the humans had clearly done their homework. Every shot was aimed perfectly at the spots where Vorthon biomechanical systems connected to their crystal technology. The impacts messed up the energy flows that powered the shields, leaving the alien ships open to more attacks. "This is Sergeant Lisa Carter in Fighter Wing Alpha," came another human voice. She sounded young but totally determined. "We have got their attention now, Colonel. Can we do Hammer Protocol?" "Do it, Sergeant. Show these bugs what human creativity looks like." What happened next made Zarakel question everything she thought she knew about space fighting. The human fighters were tiny compared to the massive Vorthon warships. They began flying in attack patterns that looked like suicide runs. But instead of trying to attack the big ships directly, they went after the smaller biomechanical drones that the Vorthons used for defense. "They are using the enemy's own defensive systems against them," said Vex 9 with something close to awe in his voice. "The human fighters are making the Vorthon drones shoot their own ships by accident." It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The humans fought with a mix of careful planning and quick thinking that the rigid Vorthon command structure could not match. When their planned tactics met unexpected problems, they switched to new approaches without missing a beat. Captain Ben Rodriguez's voice joined the growing noise of human communications. "Heavy Cruiser Washington reporting successful breakthrough enemy line. We can see big structural weak spots in their command ship's left side. Need artillery support for exact strike. Copy that, Washington. Lieutenant Amy Foster, you're up. Make it count." The human artillery ship moved into position like a machine. Instead of trying to overwhelm the Vorthon command ship with raw firepower, they fired one single, perfectly aimed shot. It hit exactly where Captain Rodriguez had said it would. The massive Vorthon ship bent and started tilting to one side. Its biomechanical systems were failing in chain reactions. How? Zarakel asked out loud. How are they doing this? Vex 9 was studying the battle data with intense focus. Ma'am, I think I understand. The Vorthans have been so successful because every species they have fought uses the same methods. Energy weapons, shield systems, fancy flying. But the humans are using completely different ideas. Solid weapons, armor that absorbs damage, and tactics based on. It almost looks like fighting in an atmosphere. As if to prove his point, a group of human fighters suddenly dropped out of formation and began attacking a Vorthon battleship from below. They used the planet's gravity to hide their approach. It was a move that made no sense according to galactic spacefighting rules, but it worked perfectly. Colonel Murphy, Zarakel transmitted. She could not keep the wonder out of her voice. Your tactics are unlike anything we have ever seen. How did you develop such strategies? The human colonel's laugh was dark but satisfied. Ma'am, we learned to fight in an atmosphere where thinking in 3 dimensions meant the difference between living and dying. Out here in space, we just have one more dimension to work with. Plus, my species has a long history of fighting enemies who outnumber us and have better weapons. We have gotten pretty good at finding their weak spots. On the battle display, the tide of war was slowly but surely turning. The Vorthon fleet, so used to sweeping aside all opposition, was meeting an enemy that refused to be swept aside. More importantly, the humans were winning. Every few minutes brought new reports that seemed impossible. Human fighters were taking out Vorthon cruisers by flying inside their shield bubbles and attacking from within. Human destroyers were using asteroid fields to launch surprise attacks. Human marines were actually boarding Vorthon ships and fighting hand-to-hand with biomechanical soldiers. This is Lieutenant Carl Davis aboard the destroyer Phoenix, came another transmission. We have successfully captured a Vorthon supply ship. Ma'am, you need to see what we found in their databanks. What did you find, Lieutenant? Asked Colonel Murphy. Sir, the Vorthons have detailed files on every species they have conquered. Detailed tactical analyses, weak points, how to beat them. But, sir, there was a pause. They have no file on humans. They have never seen anything like us before. The implications of this hit everyone in the command center at the same time. The Vorthons had conquered the galaxy by studying their enemies and developing perfect counters to every tactic, every weapon, every strategy. But they had never encountered humans before. They were fighting blind. Ma'am, reported the communications officer, we are getting signals from across the system. Vorthon ground forces are pulling back to their transport ships. Pulling back? Zarakel turned to stare at him. That is impossible. The Vorthons never retreat. They fight until they win completely or die completely. But the evidence was right there on every screen. Across the planet's surface, the biomechanical soldiers that had been steadily advancing for weeks were suddenly moving backward. They were giving up positions they had paid thousands of lives to capture. This is Staff Sergeant Chris Martinez, commanding the 1st Human Marine Battalion, came a new voice over the communications. We have just landed on the planet and are fighting Vorthon ground forces. Ma'am, if you agree, we would like to work together with your remaining defensive units. Zarakel felt her legs give out. She fell into her command chair. Humans were landing on her planet. Humans were offering to fight alongside her people. After months of hopeless retreat and terrible losses, someone was actually offering to help them take back their world. Sergeant Martinez, she managed to say, our defensive units are scattered and have given up hope. I am not sure how much help we can give you. Ma'am, no disrespect meant, but you have been holding this line for 3 months against impossible odds. That tells me your people have more fight left in them than they think. We are just here to even up the odds a little. For the first time in months, Zarakel smiled. The battle had been going on for 6 hours. The impossible was becoming real. The Vorthon fleet had never lost a big fight in their decades of conquest. Now they were being torn apart by a species that most galactic computers said was not advanced enough for space travel. Vorthon command ship is breaking away from the fight, reported Vex 9. His voice was full of disbelief. They are actually running away from the battle. Commander Zarakel watched the battle screen with growing amazement. Red dots that showed Vorthon ships were either disappearing completely or limping away from the fight. The blue dots that showed human ships kept their aggressive attack formations. It was not just that the humans were winning. They were completely dominating a force that had conquered half the galaxy. "Colonel Murphy," she transmitted, "your losses must be terrible. How many ships have you lost?" The human colonel's answer was matter of fact. 7 fighters with damage, 1 heavy cruiser with holes in the hull, and the destroyer Portland lost main power for about 20 minutes. "Nothing we cannot handle, ma'am." Zarakel stared at the display. She checked and double-checked the numbers. In 6 hours of intense fighting against a much larger enemy force, the humans had lost 0 ships. 0. Nothing like this had ever happened in galactic military history. "Ma'am," called out Communications Officer Trindar, "we are getting messages from all over the system. Our surviving defense units are saying that Vorthan ground forces are pulling back to their transport ships." "Pulling back?" Zarakel turned to stare at him. "That is impossible. The Vorthans never pull back. They fight until they win completely or die completely." But the proof was right there. All across the planet's surface, the biomechanical soldiers that had been moving forward for weeks were suddenly moving backward. They were giving up positions they had killed countless beings to capture. "This is Staff Sergeant Chris Martinez, commanding the 1st Human Marine Battalion," came a new voice over the radio. "We have just landed on the planet and are fighting Vorthan ground forces. Ma'am, if you agree, we would like to work together with your remaining defensive units." Zarakel felt her legs give out. She fell into her command chair. Humans were landing on her planet. Humans were offering to fight alongside her people. After months of hopeless retreat and terrible losses, someone was actually offering to help them take back their world. "Sergeant Martinez," she managed to say, "our defensive units are scattered and have lost hope. I am not sure how much help we can give you." "Ma'am, no disrespect meant, but you have been holding this line for 3 months against impossible odds. That tells me your people have more fight left in them than they think. We are just here to even up the odds a little." The next few hours brought reports that Zarakel would have called fantasy stories if she had not been getting them directly from her own field commanders. Human ground forces were fighting Vorthan biomechanical units with weapons and tactics that seemed designed exactly to counter their advantages. "Ma'am," reported Field Commander Kex-2 from the Northern Front, "the human soldiers are using some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapons that mess up the Vorthan neural links. Their biomechanical units are literally falling apart when they lose coordination with their organic parts. Also," added Commander Rick 7 from the Eastern Defensive Line, "the humans have somehow developed personal armor that resists Vorthan crystal weapons. Our own forces are finally able to move forward behind their protective walls." But it was not just the technology that made the difference. The humans fought with a fierceness and determination that inspired everyone around them. Zephyrian soldiers, who had been retreating for weeks, suddenly found themselves moving forward, supported by allies who seemed to think impossible odds were just an interesting tactical challenge. "This is Captain Nina Phillips, 2nd Armored Division," came another transmission. "We have broken through the Vorthan wall around the capital city. Zephyrian civilians are being moved to safe zones. We estimate we will have the city completely free within 12 hours. 12 hours. Zarakel remembered when she would have been grateful for 12 more minutes. Now these strange humans from a distant star system were promising to free her planet's capital in less than a day. "This is Lieutenant Tom Baker with the Engineering Corps," came yet another voice. "We have captured a Vorthan communication hub. Ma'am, we are intercepting their military transmissions. They are calling for immediate reinforcements from 3 neighboring systems." "They are scared," said Vex 9 with wonder in his voice. "The Vorthans are actually scared." It was true. For the first time since the war began, the Vorthans were not acting like an unstoppable force. They were acting like an army that had just discovered they could lose. "Colonel Murphy," Zarakel transmitted, her voice shaking slightly, "I need to ask you something. Why did your people come here? Why risk your lives for a species you have never met?" There was a long pause before the human colonel answered. When he did, his voice carried a weight that spoke of hard experience and harder choices. "Ma'am, about 5 years ago, the Vorthans hit a small human colony called New Perth. 300,000 civilians when we got there. He paused, and Zarakel could hear the pain in his voice. When we got there, there was nothing left but glass and ash. We made a promise that day. The Vorthans want to burn the galaxy, but they are going to have to go through us first. But surely one colony does not justify risking your entire fleet for strangers. Ma'am, with respect, you are not strangers anymore. You sent out a call for help, and we answered it. That makes you family, and humans do not abandon family. On the battle display, the last Vorthon ships were jumping to hyperspace, running from a battle they had expected to win in hours. On the planet's surface, liberation forces were moving forward on all fronts. For the first time in months, Zarakel allowed herself to believe that her people might actually survive this war. But even as hope grew in her chest, she realized that this victory was just the beginning. The humans had proven that the Vorthans could be beaten, but there were still thousands of systems under alien control, billions of beings enslaved or dead. "This is Major Pete Harrison aboard the command ship," came another transmission. "Colonel, we are detecting massive Vorthon fleet movements in the surrounding systems. It looks like they are pulling forces from their conquest fronts to deal with us." "Good," Colonel Murphy replied, and Zarakel could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. "That means other worlds are getting a break from the fighting. Time to give the Vorthans something else to think about." "Colonel Murphy," Zarakel said quietly, "what happens now?" The human's response was immediate and determined. "Now, ma'am, we take the fight to them. The Vorthans have been having things their way for too long. Time to show them what happens when they pick a fight with Earth." As reports of victory continued to pour in from across the planet, Zarakel found herself looking at the star charts with new eyes. The red zones no longer looked like conquered territory. They looked like targets waiting to be liberated. The humans had not just saved her world. They had taught the galaxy something the Vorthans had tried to make them forget. That hope, combined with determination and the willingness to fight for what was right, could overcome any enemy. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, Zarakel knew with absolute certainty who was going to win. 3 months after the liberation of Kepler 442b, the galaxy found itself seeing something that had never happened before. This was a coordinated counteroffensive against the Vorthon Empire. But this was not the desperate last stand of a dying civilization. This was something completely new. "The humans call it asymmetric warfare," explained Zarakel to the hastily gathered council of surviving species representatives. The meeting was taking place aboard the human command ship Independence, a massive vessel that served as the mobile headquarters for what they called the Liberation Fleet. "They do not fight like us," she continued, addressing the holographic images of leaders from across the galaxy. "They do not try to match the Vorthan ship or technology, for technology. Instead, they find weaknesses we never thought to look for." High Admiral Klex of the surviving Andromedans leaned forward in his projection. "You are telling us that these primitives have developed strategies that our greatest military minds could not think of?" Before Zarakel could respond, the conference room doors slid open and Colonel Murphy entered, followed by several other human officers. The human looked tired but determined. His uniform had marks from recent combat. "With respect, Admiral," Murphy said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had become his trademark. "The problem was not with your military minds. The problem was that you were all fighting the same war. The Vorthans had you figured out because you all used similar technologies, similar tactics, similar ways of thinking." Captain Diana Wells, the human naval intelligence officer, turned on a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Vorthan-controlled space, while blue areas showed liberated or contested systems. "The key," she explained, "was realizing that the Vorthans are not actually as advanced as everyone thought. They are just incredibly specialized. Their entire military doctrine is built around overwhelming technological superiority and the psychological impact of seeming invincible. But they are technologically superior," protested Admiral Klex. "Their crystal weapons cut through our best defenses like they were nothing." Colonel Murphy nodded. "That is true, Admiral, but superior technology only matters if you can use it effectively. The Vorthans built their entire war machine around energy shields and crystal weapons. So we stopped using energy shields and started using kinetic weapons. Major Pete Harrison, the fleet's tactical coordinator, stepped forward. It is like this, Admiral. Imagine you have spent your whole life preparing to fight opponents who use swords and you have developed the perfect sword-proof armor. Then someone shows up with a baseball bat. Your armor is useless, not because the bat is better than a sword, but because it is different. The analogy seemed to make sense to the assembled representatives. Counselor Vex Prime of the Zentaurian, Remnant, spoke up. But surely adaptability alone cannot account for your success rate. Our reports indicate that human forces have liberated 17 systems in the past 3 months with minimal casualties. That is because we do not just think differently about technology, explained Commander Karen Lewis, the Liberation Fleet's strategic planner. We think differently about war itself. Most galactic species seem to view combat as a formal duel between equals. Humans view combat as a problem that needs to be solved by any means necessary. She turned on another display showing the liberation of the Proxima Centauri mining colonies. Take this operation, for example. The Vorthons had heavily fortified the asteroid belt, turning it into an impregnable fortress. Every previous liberation attempt focused on breaking through those fortifications, but humans did not attack the fortifications at all, Zarakel added, remembering the briefing with amazement. They attacked the supply lines. Turns out the Vorthons were importing all their food and medical supplies from 3 systems away. Colonel Murphy's weathered face showed what might have been a smile. Hard to fight a war when your soldiers are starving and your biomechanical units are breaking down from lack of maintenance. High Admiral Klex's projection flickered as he leaned back in apparent thought. This is certainly unconventional, but surely the Vorthons will adapt to these new tactics. Oh, they are trying, acknowledged Captain Wells. But here is the thing about humans, Admiral. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We have had to get creative because we were always fighting someone who was just as smart, just as determined, and just as well equipped as we were. Adaptation is not just what we do, it is who we are. Major Harrison pulled up a star chart showing current fleet positions. Right now, we have human units operating in 47 different systems, using completely different tactics in each one. The Vorthons cannot predict what we are going to do because we do not use standard doctrines. Every operation is custom designed for the specific situation. But what about the larger strategic picture? Asked Counselor Vex Prime. Even with your success rate, the Vorthons still control thousands of systems. How do you plan to liberate an entire galaxy? The human officers exchanged glances, and Zarakel noticed something she had learned to recognize over the past months. It was the look humans got when they were about to suggest something that sounded impossible but somehow made perfect sense. We are not going to liberate the galaxy, Colonel Murphy said quietly. We are going to teach the galaxy to liberate itself. Commander Lewis turned on a new display showing human training facilities on dozens of liberated worlds. Phase 2. The liberation effort is not about human fleets fighting Vorthon fleets. It is about human advisors teaching every species in the galaxy how to fight like humans. Every species brings something different to the table, explained Captain Wells. Zephyrian warriors are incredibly tough. Andromedans have unmatched technological skills. Centaurians are natural pilots. We are not trying to turn everyone into humans. We are trying to help them fight like themselves, but with human tactical principles. The implications hung in the air like a revelation. For the first time since the Vorthon invasion began, the galactic representatives were not talking about survival or evacuation. They were talking about victory. There is something else, added Colonel Murphy, his voice taking on a harder edge. The Vorthons built their empire on the idea that resistance is futile, that their victims would eventually give up and submit, but they made one critical error in their calculations. What error? Asked Admiral Klex. Murphy's expression was grim, but determined. They assumed that sentient beings would rather live as slaves than die as free citizens. Humans have a saying, Admiral, live free or die. It is not just words to us, it is how we are built, and we have discovered that most species in this galaxy feel exactly the same way. once someone shows them that freedom is possible. The conference room fell silent as the assembled leaders absorbed the full meaning of what they were hearing. The humans were not just offering tactical assistance or technological support. They were offering something far more powerful, the absolute certainty that the war could be won. "So what do you need from us?" asked Zarakel. Colonel Murphy's answer was immediate. "Everything you have got, ma'am. Ships, soldiers, workers, engineers, pilots, anyone who is willing to fight for their freedom and the freedom of others. The Forthians want to rule the galaxy. We are going to teach the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds." As the holographic projections began flickering off, each representative returning to their people with news of hope they had not dared imagine, Zarakel found herself looking at the star chart with new eyes. The red zones no longer looked like conquered territory. They looked like liberation targets. The humans had done more than save her world. They had taught the galaxy something that the Vorthans had tried to make them forget. That hope, combined with determination and the willingness to fight for what was right, could overcome any enemy. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, Zarakel knew with absolute certainty who was going to win.